Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Conway. She is the GOP leader in the California State Assembly. And ma'am, I want to speak with you about the election. We haven't spoken yet. It's been a couple of months since November. What a tough night. I have to tell you, I thought the Senate would probably go 2/3 Democratic. That's what it looked like. Not the Assembly, but every close rate in the Assembly and more went towards the Democrats. And now the Republicans are in a 2/3 minority.
A very disappointing night for so many people.
Oh, yes.
You know, not just me personally. I was very disappointed for my candidates. I had some great candidates, very diverse candidates. I don't know if they were just ahead of their time or what.
And I want to talk to you about that because I was speaking with Mr. Hagman, a member of your caucus, and I had said
Elections
to him,
chair.
right, I had said to him, if you look at the members in Sacramento, they look like me, and there's no diversity. He said, wait a second, look at our Assembly candidates that lost. Asian Americans, Latino Americans. I mean, it does seem that there's an effort toward recruitment outside of European Americans.
Very much so.
Yet,
very much so.
It didn't work.
Yeah.
What happened in your mind? I'm sure you've done an analysis. What did you see in that analysis?
Well, and still working on the
Of
analysis.
course.
I'm calling it an autopsy.
Oh.
The patient is dead.
Right.
And let's dig through the layers and see
Right.
what contributed to the death. And I really think that part of it for us, many factors. New districts, new lines.
No doubt.
There really was confusion about where to vote. If people didn't look at the back of their sample ballot, so that's why you saw this plethora of provisional ballots.
Right.
So new lines, online voter registration.
And I have to ask you about that because, Madam Leader, there is no doubt that that online voter registration went so big for the Democrats. I mean,
the numbers we are seeing, and they actually voted.
Right, and
I think about 82% of online voter registration, those people actually voted.
and only 20% registered Republican.
Right.
I mean, those are damning numbers in a state that, as I've said before, gave us Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening? Why is there a disconnect between Californians and a Republican Party that I see really discusses and proposes more of an economic message?
Really?
We're not talking about rapes and self-deportation. It's an economic message.
Well, and all of those other issues can fall under the guise of economics. If you don't have a strong economy, then there's other social issues
Right.
that will more come into play. You know, as we look at it and as we see, I will say the governor did a fantastic job of going to college campuses.
Right.
This online voter, the
Registration.
demographics of that, very young.
I think it was 60% under 35, or something like
yes,
that.
very much so. And so to the college campuses, and really rallying for Prop 30, telling students you can go online and register. And it's a social media world, and that's what we're finding out too. I mean, I will tell you, the Obama campaign was kind of stealth at this time. It does impact nationally how people vote. They mined the social media pages. You know, people don't have landlines anymore. So who are we talking to? Are we talking? Are we texting? What are we doing?
We know the pollsters got it. At least some of them got it wrong when they were not polling cell phone users.
And that's on both sides of the aisle. I don't know that the dim polls were too much better than some of our Republican polls.
Right.
So, and a lot of the online registration was dumped at the last minute. Counties run elections, so you have this total confusion about who's eligible to vote or who isn't. And we found even in some places a huge undervote, where there was a vote for president, a vote for Prop 30, a vote for Prop 32, and nothing else. Right, and nothing else.
When we come back, I want to speak with you about initiatives you're taking on the education side. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our viewers on the California channel, we'll be right back with the leader of the Republican Party in the Assembly, Conway. We'll be right back. So, Madam Leader, we're back, and I want to speak with you about the results of Prop 30. It did pass big numbers, over 55% of the vote. You're looking to make, I guess, lemons out of lemonade. I know the party was opposed to Prop 30, but since it's the law, you want to make sure that the money is spent in a certain way. Talk to me about that.
Well, exactly. I mean, we think one of the reasons it did pass, and you know, for me personally, having been a county supervisor, a local elected, education is a huge importance to folks. And so we want to make sure that that's where that money goes. That's what it was sold to the college students as, that they would get a refund, they'd get a check back. And I think people supported it, and you're right, it was voted on, and so that's that, and now we move on. But we're looking for accountability. Where exactly is this money going to be spent?
And let's talk about that, because it's kind of a double-edged sword on the issue of accountability. It could have been put in a lockbox as we know it. Prop 38, was that the Munger Initiative? Was that the number? The Munger Initiative had a lockbox. Prop 30 does not have a lockbox. The advantage of that is there's some flexibility. The disadvantage is there's some flexibility.
Yes, exactly.
So, what are you doing to try to, I guess, is it limit flexibility? Is that fair?
Well, you look at the proposed budget, and it spells it out there pretty clear. Not all of those dollars are going to education as they were promised.
Some to realignment, which is important, as we know. Yes.
Yeah, more should be. I mean, that's another tragedy that we could talk about.
So what do we want done? I know that some of your members, specifically in the Assembly, have some bills focused upon either freezing tuition rates, creating fixed tuition for incoming freshmen. Talk to me about some of these.
Well, and this is what was basically promised in Prop 30. So, that's where we want the accountability. But 2 years ago, when I first became leader, the caucus has been focused on education because I actually see jobs in the economy, that message is always there. To me, it's chicken and egg. So jobs in the economy and education, what comes first? If you have a strong economy and good jobs, if you don't have educated workforce, that part doesn't work. If you have an educated workforce and everybody's getting a college degree and the only job available is Burger King,
right?
So to me, those are almost inseparable.
So what do you do to make yourself, the royal you, relevant on issues like this? I have to think that there'd be some Democrats that would agree with some of these proposals, but you are, like we've discussed, in a 2/3 super minority. So how do you get bills like this forward? You got to make friends. You got to talk with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
Sure.
Are we there?
Well, we've always tried to play that role,
Right.
and there is a so-called moderate caucus
Right.
across the aisle, and I sometimes joke and say, yes, you're moderate until you get tapped on the shoulder and you're told you have to do this. But for the most part,
be that as it may.
Yes, and so I have to believe that they have to be just as concerned about this, some of them,
Well, look,
themselves.
Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
A 2/3 supermajority means everything falls on you. And so in the final analysis, it would seem to behoove them, the Democrats, to make friends and make sure that it doesn't all fall on them, that it becomes more bipartisan.
We have always felt that we're the conscience of the legislature, and that role for us will continue. And I think part of what we hope to accomplish is really to engage the voters and the taxpayers. We want to keep them informed with the facts. We don't have to necessarily spin anything or have any rhetoric. We just want them to know the truth. This is what you voted for, but this is what you're getting.
Right.
And then try to find an effective way to make sure that they do get what they thought they were voting for.
When you look at, quote, the moderate caucus, it seems as if the moderate caucus is really more in the Senate than in the Assembly. Is that fair? Are there new moderates that I haven't met yet?
I'm still getting to know
Right.
across the aisle,
Right.
the new class, and interesting about that, that's 38 out of 80 members,
Right.
and by the time a couple of them
specials.
leave and go to the Senate, and one's going to City Council or whatever,
Right.
fully we will have half of the floor will be brand new members,
Right.
with a 12-year opportunity.
Right.
So it's a different kind of election, and they have a little more time. It's going to be interesting. The ones that I have met, the jury's still out, but
Right.
they speak in various support of small business terms.
And presumably, they're in
Yes.
tougher districts.
Right.
Presumably. These are
Exactly.
the
That's
new
what-
lines, pluses and minuses, but
That's what Prop 14 was supposed
Right,
to accomplish.
right.
We'll see if it actually did.
and that's where we're at now. Okay, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Her name is Connie Conway. She is the GOP leader in the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching California Edition. We'll be right back. This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Glad you're still with us. Our guest, Steve Bradford, member of the California State Assembly. And so I want to speak with you about gun rights, gun control. We know California has amongst the most restrictive gun laws on the books. Some would think that's a net positive. Others think it's a net negative. What's your sense of California's gun laws vis-a-vis other states, vis-a-vis the federal government?
As you stated, California probably has some of the most progressive gun laws in the nation, and that's thanks to our Senator Dianne Feinstein, who introduced that bill like 7 years ago. And I think we can do better, though. I think we can reduce magazine size purchases, so you won't have a gun that is capable of holding 50 rounds at one time.
And just to make it clear, because we hear the word magazines, we hear clips, we're not sure what that means. As I understand it, it's literally the ability based upon the shooter's finger to keep shooting without reloading.
Exactly.
So there could be a magazine of 10 bullets,
Exactly.
which I understand is seen as an appropriate amount.
Exactly.
I'm not a gun expert. But for example, in Connecticut, the magazine size was 30 bullets. At the Sikh temple in Milwaukee, it was 100 bullets. So you're looking to change the law here in California.
Exactly.
So what is the sense of whether that can or cannot happen? I know, for example, a former colleague, Anthony Portantino, he had been a big supporter of restrictive laws. He was targeted by the NRA. How are you feeling about that?
It's going to be an uphill challenge, but I think we right now as legislators, as public servants, have to take on this tough issue right now. Dr. King once said, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And it's time for our friends to speak out right now on issues such as gun control.
And so look, at some level, you don't need to speak with your friends on the Republican side of the aisle because you do have a 2/3 majority in both houses. But that being said, I don't think that's your style. No. And so what are your friends, presuming they have not been supportive of gun restrictive laws, saying about more restrictions?
We have to explain to them that it's not taking away your Second Amendment right, your right to own a gun. We're seeing it's no need for a citizen to own an automatic weapon. That's only for law enforcement and the military. These are weapons of mass destruction, and they serve no personal good as far as protecting your home.
Do we need magazines, for example, for deer hunting? I mean, does a hunter, again, I'm not one, so does a hunter need to be able to shoot 30 rounds? No. That's not needed.
You want to preserve the animal, in which if you have a trophy animal.
If you want to eat.
Exactly, and you don't want it riddled with bullets.
What about the federal side? I know obviously you're a legislator in Sacramento, but a lot of what we're dealing with here is a patchwork of laws. And while we may have progressive restrictive laws in California, we are one nation. Is that something that Sacramento can do, speaking to its members of Congress to say, I don't know if you'd send a resolution saying we'd like you to pass these following. Where are we on that?
It's often said, so goes California, so goes the nation.
Which is true.
So we've led in so many other areas. I think it's a great opportunity for us to show leadership in this area of gun control. I think California could raise the bar and lead the nation.
And as you know, New York recently passed some more restrictive laws. Do you think we're starting to see, I personally thought when Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot, that would be the straw that broke the camel's back, not taking a position. Sandy Hook became it apparently, or not.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think so, and it's a shame that such tragedies like this have, allowed us to have that discussion when we have mass murders all the time in drive-bys in Camden, New Jersey, and Chicago, and Detroit, and
Los
Angeles, and we're not talking about it in the same level.
Right.
So I think now is the time to step up.
Okay. His name is Steve Bradford. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. Otherwise, we'll be right back. Welcome back, Mr. Bradford. I want to speak with you about what we know as prison realignment, the system whereby lower-level offenders are being incarcerated in county jails. You represent portions of Los Angeles County, and we've learned recently that Los Angeles County is not using a system known as split sentences, whereby after a incarcerated individual is released for a low-level offense out of LA County, they're not being put on supervision. There's no supervision tail, as it's known, no parole. And as a result, it becomes difficult for the system to follow the incarcerated or the now released, and frankly, for the incarcerated, for the newly released, I mean, they have no support.
Yeah, it's summary probation where they have to check in on a regular basis. Again, they're not tracked in any kind of a way. Last year, I had a bill trying to address some of this by providing some of the resources to the Sheriff's Department before these individuals were released, to provide them with where they get a driver's license, where they get mental health services, things of that nature, to assist them in that transition, understanding that, again, they would not be tracked in the same fashion.
So what's happening? Because it really is becoming a problem. I mean, you have other counties throughout the state, they put supervision tails on sentences 40% of the time. Los Angeles County, you know, maybe 5% of the time. I mean, I don't know if you got to call the DA or the judges. I mean, I guess at a certain level, it's a local control issue, or maybe not.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's a resource issue as well, understanding the size of LA County and the number of folks. And another way I was trying to address this issue is through expungement. Because again, if they're low-level offenders, they have served their time in county jail or being assigned to county jail, they should be allowed to clean their record and find employment. Reason why we're having much of these problems, because these individuals have no pathway to emerging themselves back in society.
Right, which is a different issue, and let's talk about that issue. Because whether someone's record is expunged or not, there is the question of reintegration. And part of the reason why people were hopeful in terms of the realignment scheme is because if you are serving in a county jail, that means that's your home county. You're closer to home. You should have more support when you get out, aside from this parole issue. Hopefully the counties can engage in effective, localized rehabilitation programs. I know we're only a year out, but I don't know if we're seeing that, that kind of support for these individuals.
Because I think the challenge is, again, many folks are still haven't embraced this realignment, and
we don't got a choice.
Exactly.
I mean, Governor Brown is not going to come out against the U.S. Supreme Court. He's not going to be held in contempt. We have to release prisoners, or decrease our prison population, I should say.
Without a doubt. And so this is a challenge that we grapple with every day in the legislature of how do we make this fair and just? How do we allow folks to be comfortable in the fact that we're not letting the violent offenders out in the community, and this is the low level, the N3s, as they say, nonviolent, non-sexual, non-serious, the back into the society. But again, some type of monitoring system to make sure that they are living up to their obligations of their sentence.
So there is a lot of talk about trying to close these, quote, loopholes as part of the realignment scheme. But the challenge becomes, if you start closing loopholes, presumably you could have more incarceration. And we know that as we speak today, we're not going to hit the target mandated by the federal courts in terms of decreasing our prison population. So while it may feel good to, you know, be tough on crime, we could be in violation of Supreme Court order if we start closing loopholes to improve realignment.
Without a doubt. I think we have to follow the adage of our Attorney General being smart on crime. And a lot of times we're still in that old way of doing things because we've done it for the last 200 years like this. So
what about the issue of prison construction? You know, for some it's the Holy Grail, for others it's you're wasting money, we should be building schools. But we do appear, I mean, we have a bigger population. Is it time to start prison construction?
I'm still not there. I still think as a society we'll be better served if we find a way of rehabilitating these folks, allowing them again to transition back into society. California has the largest recidivism rate in the nation, and I think we do a bad job already in our prisons in trying to rehabilitate these folks to let them reintegrate in society.
So with California apparently in the black, who would have thunk that the California state budget would be in the black? Is there money for rehab programs? Well, I mean, now's the time.
In the words of the speaker, we're happy to be broke.
well,
so it's different from the deficit. So is there money? No, but I think we as legislators have to find a way to invest again in education and then make these opportunities.
His name is Steve Bradford. He's a member of the California State Assembly, also chair of the Utilities and Commerce Committee. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. The This is California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Our guest, Ted Lieu, member of the California State Senate. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Both of us have children in school. They're elementary school age, and so we were just devastated by the loss at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut. You are looking at ways to improve safety of children in our midst. What are you looking to do out of Sacramento?
President Obama has said that taking care of our children is our first priority. And when I was in the Assembly, I introduced a bill to enforce school safety plans and to modernize them. Unfortunately, it did not pass at the time, but I'm reintroducing it now in the Senate, because if you were to ask the question, very simple question, which schools in California have school safety plans and which do not, no one knows the answer.
What is a school safety plan?
It is a series of procedures that administrators and teachers would take if there were a natural disaster or an active shooter with a gun or any other series of catastrophes that could happen. And so they would follow these procedures in the event of a catastrophe.
Now, would these plans, these legislation, I should say, apply to only public schools? Will they apply to independent schools as well?
So under their education code, they currently apply to public schools. My children go to public school.
Right.
But I'm also going to apply to charter schools with the legislation. But keep in mind, there is existing law that says public schools have to do this. It just happens that some or many are not, because there's no consequence if you don't have a plan.
What about independent schools, private schools?
They do not have to follow the California education code.
It's that simple.
Correct. It's
And
that
there's
simple. But you would hope they would. We can't mandate
Really?
a religious school to do a lot of things.
Even on safety?
So one step at a time. Well, let's make sure our public schools are safe first.
Now, it seems to me that when we look at gun laws generally, I mean, I've seen those maps in the various print publications, and California always is the darkest in terms of the most, quote, restrictive in terms of gun laws. Is that fair to see it that way?
We actually have some of the nation's strongest gun laws. And a lot of what New York did in the recent legislation, they basically copied what California has already done.
So I know that any shooting is a fluke, but is it fair to say that the weapons that were used in Connecticut, be it the magazines, be it the type of weapon, could those have even been acquired in California?
They likely would have been banned. I don't know specifically the exact kind of model and cartridge and so on that the shooter used, but California does have an assault weapons ban already.
So at this stage, does California need to take more steps to limit gun purchases, how guns are sold, how bullets are sold, in your mind?
Well, I would look at any ideas with an open mind, but I do think it's a multi-pronged approach that has to be taken. You have mental health issues, you have school safety issues. I'm focusing on the school safety part of this.
And let's talk about mental health, because there's no doubt that the shooter, as deplorable as he was, there had to have been a mental impairment. And in so many ways, we hurt for his family, as well for him in the final analysis. I mean, what a tragedy this is. Are we falling down? He was only 20. I mean, he was just in high school.
Correct.
So is there something California can do on the mental health side in schools?
Well, there's always additional funding that is needed for mental health programs. It is a very complex issue because you also have civil libertarian concerns. You can't just start putting people into insane asylums the minute they show any little aspect of mental illness. But there's also the other extreme where you don't do anything. So it is a complex issue.
Okay, for our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. We'll be talking about prison realignment with Senator Ted Lieu. Senator Lieu, thanks for staying with us. On the issue of prison realignment, we know that as part of a plan to decrease our prison population as mandated by the U.S. Supreme Court, lower level offenders are being incarcerated not at state prisons but county jails. We're about a year outside of that new plan. How has it been going in your mind?
It's largely been going well. I supported the plan. We have reduced our state prison population. We have effectively put in realignment, and it's been working generally pretty well. But I've never seen a perfect law.
Of course
every
not.
law has some unintended consequences, and so we're trying to fix some of the unintended consequences.
And let's talk about some of them. I know that many counties they are seeing their own jails become overcrowded. And so what they have been doing is releasing prisoners, I don't want to so much say early, but they're having to adjust how they sentence prisoners. And one of the ways they're doing it is they are putting on ankle bracelets with GPS systems on them. And the view is that if operated effectively, there can be monitoring, and as a result, it's a way to keep prisons from not bulging at the seams. How is that system going in your mind?
So I support GPS ankle bracelet monitoring. It is cheaper to do, and it's effective if they wear the ankle bracelet.
Right.
And we've seen a problem where after realignment, you have felons and prisoners when they're released cutting off their ankle bracelet.
The audacity. The audacity.
With not much consequence. So before realignment, if you cut off your ankle bracelet, you would go to state prison for a year. Pretty hefty penalty. Right now, if you cut off your ankle bracelet, the most you could get would be 6 months in a county jail. But because so many of them are overcrowded, some counties don't even book these violations because they view it as a technical parole violation.
Right.
So I have a bill that will restore the status quo from before, which is making it a 1-year felony in state prison.
State prison.
Correct, because you need a consequence for these felons. Before realignment, you had about 173 people cutting off ankle bracelets in a year.
Right.
It spiked to nearly 300, over a 60% increase because the time got reduced and the location of their punishment got reduced.
But I had thought that any sentence essentially under 3 years, under realignment, automatically passes to counties.
That's why we need a bill.
So it would be specific to this crime.
It just for ankle bracelets because we have to make sure that this system's enforced. And right now, if you don't have a consequence for these folks, they're going to be cutting them off.
Now, I get it. I understand where you're going. But here's the challenge. We are still under U.S. Supreme Court order to decrease our prison population in California state prisons. As we speak today, we're not going to hit the target in June. We're going to be about 9,000 over the amount. So if we start adding penalties that send people to state prisons, we could be even farther above.
This is why this is not going to increase prison population.
Why?
Because the primary number of these felons are sex offenders.
Okay.
There's then a second portion that's hardcore gang members. But the overwhelming majority of these people who wear ankle bracelets are sex offenders. And studies show that when they are monitored with ankle bracelets, they tend not to commit new crimes. So in effect, by having them cut off these bracelets, they're going to commit new crimes and then land back in state prison. By having them monitored with these ankle bracelets, you will actually reduce crime, reduce the state prison population.
Why won't they cut them off if they have been cutting them off?
Because of the consequence of going back to state prison for a year.
And so,
and there were far fewer people that did it in the prior
do you think,
status quo that we had before.
Do you think these convicts know this? I mean, are they that calculating?
Well, so think about it. Without any attention to this, there was a spike of nearly 60% the minute realignment happened and these folks figured out, hey, it's no longer a year in state prison. It's at most 6 months, and maybe the county jail won't even book me.
But could it have been that we just started using more GPSs? So the number was going to spike?
No, the numbers we had were from actually
they were consistent.
From the state prison population, the folks that are being released. That was not the cause of this spike.
Okay, so let's talk about the likelihood this bill will make it out of the Senate and the Assembly and be signed by the governor. What do you think?
Well, you have a bill that's going to reduce crime because when you monitor sex offenders, they tend to commit less crime. Second, it's mandated by Jessica's law. Sex offenders just need to wear these GPS ankle bracelets.
But this will apply for all.
It will, but again, most of the folks that wear these bracelets are sex offenders. And if you don't monitor them, they're going to recidivate at a much higher percentage and go right back to state prison.
His name is Ted Lieu, member of the California State Senate. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching California Edition.